My wife's family had successfully scammed 17 families before targeting me. What they didn't realize was that their previous victims had been building a case against them. The ultimate betrayal. How my wife's family tried to steal my home. At 42, I thought I understood human nature. 7 years of marriage had taught me about compromise, trust, and partnership. What I discovered about family loyalty that winter would shatter everything I believed about the people closest to us. He's too spineless to fight back, my wife's mother whispered to her brother while unpacking boxes in my living room. Just watch him cave. Their laughter echoed through the house my grandfather had left me. I walked away that afternoon. 72 hours later, their phones wouldn't stop ringing. I never imagined I'd be sharing this story publicly, but if you've lived long enough, you know that some experiences demand to be told. This nightmare began 4 months ago when my wife Catherine lost her position as a dental hygienist. We'd been married for 7 years, living comfortably in our modest four-bedroom colonial that I'd inherited from my grandfather. The house sat on 2 acres in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but solid middle-class comfort. Initially, everything seemed manageable. We had emergency savings, and my income as a mechanical engineer covered our monthly expenses while Catherine searched for new opportunities. The foundation of our life felt secure. Then her mother Rebecca called. Just for a long weekend, she said, her voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over the years. Catherine needs family support during this transition. I should have trusted my instincts when she arrived with enough luggage for a month-long vacation. The first warning sign appeared so subtly, I almost dismissed it entirely. I returned from my shift at the manufacturing plant to discover Rebecca had completely reorganized our living room. Just optimizing the flow, she explained with that practiced smile that never quite touched her eyes. Don't you think it's more welcoming this way? Catherine seemed genuinely pleased with the changes, so I swallowed my discomfort and said nothing. Within 10 days, Rebecca had systematically taken control of our kitchen. My morning protein smoothies vanished, replaced by her elaborate collection of organic wellness drinks. My carefully organized meal prep containers disappeared to accommodate her extensive array of specialty cookware and exotic spices. You'll appreciate the upgrade eventually, she'd say, patting my shoulder with condescending affection like I was an unenlightened child. The situation escalated when Catherine's brother Marcus appeared without warning on a Thursday evening, dragging a military-style duffel bag behind him. Apartment flooded, bro, he announced, already making himself comfortable on our sectional sofa. Just need to crash for a few nights while insurance sorts everything out. I noticed he conveniently avoided mentioning any specific timeline for his departure. The household dynamic shifted dramatically after Marcus's arrival. Suddenly, every dinner conversation became an intense strategy session about getting everyone back on solid ground. I'd enter rooms to find hushed conversations that abruptly stopped, followed by uncomfortable silences and meaningful glances exchanged between family members. Catherine began spending increasingly more time with them, speaking in whispers and giving me these strange, evaluating looks when she thought I wasn't paying attention. 3 weeks into this invasion, I came home to find Rebecca's recently divorced daughter Sarah sitting at our dining room table. Legal documents and financial statements spread across the surface like she owned the place. Mom suggested we consolidate resources during these challenging times, she explained without even glancing up from her paperwork. Her 6-year-old son was already settled into our guest bedroom, his toys scattered throughout the house. That night, I attempted to have a serious conversation with Catherine about the rapidly deteriorating situation. This is spiraling completely out of control, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. She looked at me with an expression of profound disappointment I'd never seen before. Their family, Michael. They're struggling and need our support. Why are you being so incredibly selfish about this? The absolute breaking point arrived on a frigid Tuesday morning. I was working remotely from my home office when I heard the unmistakable sounds of heavy furniture being moved outside. Looking through the window, my heart nearly stopped as I watched a commercial moving truck parked in our driveway. Marcus and several unfamiliar men were systematically unloading what appeared to be an entire household's worth of furniture and belongings. Rebecca stood in our front yard like a commanding general, directing the operation with military precision. I bolted outside, still wearing my work clothes and house slippers, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. What exactly is happening here? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Rebecca turned toward me with that same patronizing expression I'd grown to despise. Oh, sweetheart, we're moving in permanently. The rental situation was simply too financially draining to maintain with everyone's current circumstances. This is my house, I said, my voice rising with each word. You absolutely cannot just decide to move in without discussing this with me first. That's when Catherine's uncle Gerald emerged from his sedan, clutching a manila folder thick with legal documents. Actually, he said with a smugness that made my skin crawl, we've been having extensive discussions about modifying the living arrangements. Catherine believes it would be prudent to add her name to the property deed for enhanced financial security. They formed a semicircle around me, these people who had systematically invaded my life piece by piece over the past month. He's too spineless to fight back, Rebecca announced loudly enough for the entire neighborhood to hear, her words directed at Gerald but clearly intended for my ears. Just watch him cave completely, Marcus added with cruel laughter, deliberately bumping into me as he carried another box toward my front door. I looked desperately at Catherine, standing there with her family members, her eyes fixed on the ground, unable or unwilling to meet my gaze. 7 years of marriage, shared dreams, intimate conversations, and countless moments of love and trust, and suddenly I was staring at a complete stranger. I walked back inside, past the towers of cardboard boxes cluttering my hallway, past the family photographs that were already being replaced with their personal items, and went directly to my office. They probably assumed I was retreating in defeat, running away exactly as they had predicted and planned. But they had no knowledge of the security camera system I'd discreetly installed 3 weeks earlier when the situation first began feeling threatening and wrong. They were completely unaware of the hours of recorded conversations I'd been systematically collecting, documenting their strategy sessions and private discussions. They had absolutely no idea that I'd been meticulously building a comprehensive case against them since Rebecca's initial arrival. From my office, I made 4 crucial phone calls that afternoon. Then I methodically packed a suitcase, retrieved my most important documents from the fireproof safe, and walked out the front door with quiet determination. As I started my Toyota Camry, I could hear them celebrating inside what they believed was now their house. See that? Marcus's voice carried through the walls. Told you he'd run like a scared rabbit. They had absolutely no idea what was about to hit them. None whatsoever. The following 48 hours would prove to be among the most intense and revelatory of my entire life. After checking into a nearby Hampton Inn, I spent the evening carefully reviewing the security footage from my hidden cameras. What I discovered in those recordings made my blood run completely cold and changed everything I thought I knew about the people who had invaded my home. The first video clip showed Rebecca and Gerald in my office at 2 in the morning, methodically searching through my filing cabinets and personal documents. His grandfather left him this property completely free and clear, Gerald was saying while photographing my paperwork with his phone. No mortgage payments, and the current market equity alone could financially support our entire extended family for several years. Rebecca's response was absolutely chilling. Catherine mentioned he's been discussing adding her to the deed recently. We simply need to accelerate that process significantly. Another recording captured Marcus and Sarah in the kitchen during what they thought was a private conversation. Mom's orchestrated this exact scenario before, Sarah said while making coffee. Remember our cousin Daniel's situation 2 years ago? 6 months of strategic pressure, and his wife signed everything over just to escape the constant stress and conflict. They laughed about it like it was some kind of amusing family tradition, rather than systematic fraud. But the most devastating footage showed Catherine, my wife, the woman I'd loved and trusted for 7 years, sitting with her mother and planning the psychological manipulation designed to pressure me into surrendering my inheritance. He's fundamentally too nice and accommodating, Catherine said with casual certainty. He'll do absolutely anything to make me happy and maintain family harmony. We just need to apply consistent, escalating pressure until he breaks. I spent that sleepless night making phone calls and sending detailed emails. By sunrise, I had appointments scheduled with 3 different attorneys, each specializing in different aspects of what was clearly becoming a complex legal situation. The first lawyer took one comprehensive look at my evidence and immediately began taking extensive notes. This isn't their first attempt at this kind of scheme, she said gravely. pulling up court records on her computer screen. Your in-laws have an established pattern of behavior. They've successfully executed this exact strategy against at least 3 other families over the past 5 years. They systematically target people with valuable properties, move in under false pretenses, and essentially force them out through sustained psychological warfare and legal manipulation. She showed me documented evidence from a case 3 years earlier involving a man named Daniel, the same cousin they'd casually mentioned in their recorded conversation. He had lost his family home to them through identical tactics. They had moved in, overwhelmed him with their presence and demands, and eventually pressured his wife into divorce. The property was subsequently sold, and they disappeared with the proceeds while Daniel lost everything he'd worked for. While I was processing this horrifying information, my phone began receiving a constant stream of messages and calls. Catherine had discovered that I'd withdrawn $35,000 from our joint savings account, money I had earned and saved independently before our marriage. The messages ranged from desperate pleading to outright threats. "Baby, please come home immediately. We can work through this misunderstanding," followed by, "Mom says you're being completely ridiculous and paranoid. If you don't return by tonight, we'll have to call the police and report you for abandonment. And finally, you're absolutely breaking my heart with this selfish behavior." Then came the voicemails from Rebecca, her voice dripping with barely concealed menace. "You're making an enormous mistake, Michael. Gerald says abandonment constitutes legal grounds for divorce in our state. Think very carefully about your next move and the consequences of your actions." They remained completely unaware that I was already 15 steps ahead of their scheme. I possessed comprehensive documentation of every dollar I'd invested in that house, legal proof that it was purchased entirely before our marriage, complete records of my grandfather's estate paperwork, and now, thanks to their careless arrogance, video evidence of their entire criminal conspiracy. The next revelation came from my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, who sent me security footage from her doorbell camera system. The recordings showed Marcus and several unidentified accomplices loading what appeared to be my computer equipment and electronics into their van at 3:30 in the morning. I immediately filed a detailed police report for theft and burglary. That afternoon, I received a text message from an unknown number. "I heard they're targeting another family. I have everything documented from what they did to me. Contact me if you need assistance." It was signed Daniel, the cousin they had previously scammed. His willingness to help provided the final pieces of evidence I needed. Yesterday morning brought an email from Gerald containing draft divorce papers with terms that would grant Catherine 50% of everything I owned, including my grandfather's house and all accumulated assets. They genuinely believed I would simply accept these outrageous demands and surrender without any resistance. What happened next still feels almost surreal, like something from a legal thriller, rather than my actual life. I was sitting in my hotel room, reviewing documents with my attorney, when the front desk called to inform me that Catherine was in the lobby, becoming increasingly agitated and demanding to know my room number. They had already turned her away twice for disruptive behavior. I watched through the hotel's security monitor system as she stood there crying dramatically, telling anyone within earshot about her mentally unstable husband who had cruelly abandoned her and her struggling family members. This was the same woman who, just days earlier, I had watched on camera coldly plotting to steal everything my grandfather had left me. The disconnect between her public performance and her private actions was absolutely staggering. The desk clerk, bless her professional heart, simply stated, "Ma'am, if you don't leave the premises immediately, we'll be forced to call security." Catherine finally departed, but not before shouting that I would deeply regret my actions and that her family had ways of dealing with people like me. While she was putting on that pathetic show in the lobby, my attorney was filing multiple legal documents with the court system. Tomorrow morning, several people are going to receive some very official papers that will fundamentally change the entire situation. I've been advised not to discuss the specific details right now, but let's just say Rebecca's smug confidence isn't going to last much longer. The next morning arrived with perfect clarity and purpose. At exactly 9 o'clock, 6 separate process servers appeared at my house, each carrying different legal documents to deliver. My security cameras captured every moment of their surprise and growing panic. Rebecca answered the door first, coffee mug in hand, still wearing her bathrobe and looking completely unprepared for what was about to unfold. Her face transformed from annoyed confusion to absolute terror as the first server asked if she was Rebecca Patterson. By the time the sixth server arrived, she was practically screaming for Gerald while the others gathered around in bewildered chaos. Here's exactly what they received that morning. Emergency eviction notices for all family members currently residing illegally on my property. Individual cease and desist orders specifically naming each person. A comprehensive restraining order against Marcus following the documented computer theft. Intent to sue notifications for harassment, attempted property theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. And finally, official divorce papers for Catherine with terms that would leave her with absolutely nothing. But let me explain exactly how we reached this decisive moment. Remember Daniel, the cousin they had previously scammed? It turns out he had been systematically gathering evidence against them for years, waiting for the right opportunity to expose their criminal activities. 3 days ago, he drove 8 hours to meet with me and my attorney, bringing multiple boxes of documents that revealed the full scope of their operations. The similarities between cases were absolutely eerie and demonstrated a clear pattern of criminal behavior. They had successfully executed this exact scheme against 6 different families, not just the 3 we had initially discovered. The playbook never varied. Target someone with valuable property, move in gradually under false pretenses, systematically isolate them from friends and support systems, then apply sustained pressure until they break completely. Daniel's documentation included bank records showing how they had systematically funneled money from previous properties, email communications discussing their strategies and victim selection, and even audio recordings of Rebecca bragging about their successes at family gatherings. They almost destroyed my children's futures, Daniel told me, his hands trembling as he showed me photographs of his former home. My wife chose them over our marriage. Don't let them win again. The real breakthrough came when we discovered that Gerald's involvement went far deeper than simply being their family attorney. He had been taking substantial cuts from every property they had illegally acquired, hiding the money through a complex series of shell companies and offshore accounts. Yesterday, while they assumed I was hiding defeated in my hotel, I was actually meeting with federal investigators who had been building a case against them for months. They just needed someone willing to come forward with comprehensive evidence and testimony. The cameras in my house had captured absolutely everything. Rebecca systematically going through my mail and personal documents, Marcus stealing my computer equipment and electronics, Sarah attempting to forge my signature on various documents, and every conversation where they plotted to steal my inheritance. All recorded in high-definition video with crystal-clear audio quality. But the most damning evidence came directly from Catherine herself. 2 nights ago, she sent me a lengthy email that she probably thought would help her case and bring me back under their control. Instead, she accidentally provided a complete written confession to their entire criminal conspiracy. You should have just added me to the deed exactly like we planned from the beginning. Mom knows exactly what she's doing because she's successfully helped so many family members secure their financial futures this way. If you had just cooperated and stopped being so selfish, everyone would be happy and secure. It's not like you actually need such a large house anyway, especially for just one person. I forwarded that email to my attorney so quickly, I nearly broke my phone screen. This morning, while the process servers were delivering their legal papers, I was in a meeting with my bank's fraud department. It turns out Catherine had attempted to open multiple new credit cards in my name and had tried to access my individual retirement accounts. The security department had caught the attempted fraud and frozen everything. My security cameras captured their reactions to receiving the legal papers, and watching their panic unfold was both satisfying and deeply disturbing. Rebecca immediately began ripping up the documents, which was particularly stupid since we obviously had multiple copies. Marcus started throwing furniture and punching walls like an overgrown child. Sarah broke down crying while frantically calling someone on her phone. Gerald paced back and forth, looking genuinely worried for the first time since this nightmare began. Then came the predictable flood of phone calls. First, Catherine, completely hysterical. How could you possibly do this to your own family? We love you, and we're just trying to help. I let it go directly to voicemail. Rebecca tried next, her voice shaking with rage. You have absolutely no idea who you're messing with or what we're capable of doing to you. Actually, I knew exactly who I was dealing with, which is why I had prepared so thoroughly. Gerald's call was notably different from the others. No threats or emotional manipulation, just a quiet, "Let's discuss this situation. There might be a way to resolve everything privately without involving the courts. Too late for any negotiations or deals." The final message came from Marcus. "You think some stupid papers will scare us? We've dealt with much worse than you, and we know how to handle threats." That's when I sent them the final notice. They had exactly 72 hours to completely vacate my property. After that deadline, the sheriff's department would get involved with forced removal. I also included several choice video clips from my security cameras, just so they would understand exactly what evidence I possessed and how thoroughly they had incriminated themselves. An hour later, my neighbor texted me with an update. "Moving trucks just arrived. They're packing like the house is on fire." I remained at my hotel, watching the entire chaotic evacuation unfold through my security camera system. Rebecca was directing the panicked exodus, but her hands were visibly shaking. Gerald kept checking his phone constantly, looking increasingly nervous. Catherine sat motionless on our couch, just staring into space like she couldn't process what was happening. They had assumed I was weak and would run away when confronted. Instead, I had spent those 3 days building an absolutely airtight legal case against them. Now they were the ones running in terror, but their nightmare was just beginning. 2 months have passed since that dramatic confrontation, and I've waited to share this final update because I wanted to see everything through to its ultimate conclusion. What happened next exceeded even my most optimistic expectations and delivered justice beyond anything I could have imagined. The day after my last update, the federal investigators I had been working with launched their comprehensive operation. It turns out they had been building a case against my former in-laws for over 2 years. My evidence and testimony provided the final pieces they needed to move forward with arrests and prosecutions. That Tuesday morning, Rebecca woke up to federal agents at her door with search warrants for every property she owned or controlled. All 8 properties, purchased with money systematically stolen from their victims through fraud and manipulation. Simultaneously, other agents were executing warrants at Gerald's law office and residence. My security cameras captured the moment they realized the full scope of what was happening to them, and their terror was absolutely priceless. Rebecca actually tried flushing documents down her toilet while federal agents waited in her living room. Definitely not the smartest criminal behavior, and it only added destruction of evidence to her growing list of federal charges. Remember those shell companies Gerald had used to hide their stolen money? Each one led investigators to additional victims and criminal activities. In total, they had systematically defrauded 17 families over 9 years, not just the 6 we had initially discovered. Each case followed their identical pattern: move in, isolate, pressure, and steal. They had perfected their technique with each new target, becoming increasingly bold and ruthless. Marcus attempted to run when he saw the federal agents approaching. He made it approximately 4 blocks before they apprehended him right next to the storage unit where he had hidden my stolen computer equipment. Storing stolen goods under his own name definitely wasn't his brightest decision, but it made the prosecutor's job much easier. Sarah broke down first when faced with losing custody of her child. She told investigators absolutely everything: how they selected their targets, how they systematically manipulated and psychologically broke their victims, how they laundered the stolen money through various accounts and properties. She even revealed additional scams and victims that we hadn't discovered during our investigation. But the most shocking moment came from Catherine. When investigators presented her with the overwhelming evidence, including the recordings of her plotting with her family, she didn't cry, apologize, or show any remorse whatsoever. Instead, she smiled coldly and said, "You really think this will stick in court? We're much smarter than you think, and we have resources you don't know about." That arrogant smile disappeared very quickly when the investigators revealed their ace in the hole. Daniel wasn't their only previous victim who had come forward. 7 other families had contacted authorities that week, each bringing years of documented evidence, financial records, and testimony, all pointing to the same group of criminals and their systematic fraud operations. The legal dominoes fell rapidly after that. Gerald was immediately disbarred and faces 15 to 20 years in federal prison for his involvement in multiple fraud cases across state lines. His law license is permanently revoked, and all his assets have been seized for victim restitution. Rebecca's carefully constructed empire collapsed overnight. Those 8 properties were all seized by federal marshals. The money she had hidden in offshore accounts was frozen and traced back to specific victims. Her social circle evaporated once people realized they might be investigated for potential involvement or knowledge of her crimes. Marcus's theft of my computer equipment became the least of his legal problems when investigators examined his laptop computer. It turns out he had kept detailed digital records of every scam, thinking he was being clever by documenting their successes. Those meticulous records implicated everyone involved, including extended family members we hadn't even known were participating in their criminal activities. Sarah received a lighter sentence in exchange for her comprehensive cooperation with investigators, but she lost custody of her child. Her ex-husband now has full custody and has moved across the country to protect their son from any future contact with her family. Sometimes karma delivers justice in unexpected ways. The investigators also discovered a storage unit rented under Catherine's name that none of us had known about. Inside, they found everything the family had stolen from their previous victims over the years: family heirlooms, important documents, jewelry, photographs, and personal items. They had kept trophies from each successful theft, like serial criminals collecting souvenirs. That discovery fundamentally changed the entire scope of the investigation and added multiple additional charges. Catherine didn't fare well during her court proceedings. The judge was particularly interested in her detailed emails that outlined their criminal plans and her complete lack of remorse. The divorce was finalized last week, and she received absolutely nothing. The prenuptial agreement I had insisted on held up perfectly in court, especially after her documented attempts to defraud me were presented as evidence. Restitution payments to all the victims have finally begun. Every property, every bank account, every asset they had accumulated through their systematic fraud is being liquidated. Daniel and the other families will finally receive justice and financial compensation for what was stolen from them. My house is currently undergoing a complete renovation and security upgrade. The professional cleaning crew found additional hidden cameras they had secretly installed to spy on my daily activities. They had even made duplicate copies of all my keys and had been entering the house when I wasn't home. The level of violation and invasion still affects me sometimes, but I'm working through it with an excellent therapist. Last week, I received a letter from Catherine, written from her current temporary residence while awaiting sentencing. She wrote that she had never actually loved me, that I was just another carefully selected target chosen because I had valuable property and seemed easy to manipulate and control. She claimed their entire relationship had been a calculated deception from the very beginning. I didn't respond to her letter. Instead, I forwarded it directly to the investigators. It's now officially evidence item number 347 in their comprehensive case file. Yesterday, I saw a news article about their criminal case. They're calling it one of the largest family-based fraud and theft schemes in our state's history. Rebecca's photograph made the front page of the newspaper, looking significantly less smug while wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. I'm back home now, fully settled into my grandfather's house. The family photographs are mine again, displayed exactly where I want them. The furniture is arranged according to my preferences and comfort. The new security system is absolutely state-of-the-art, and I finally feel safe and secure in my own space again. That prenuptial agreement I mentioned earlier had a special clause about attempted fraud and criminal behavior. My attorney says Catherine will be paying my legal fees for many years to come, assuming she ever earns enough money to make the payments. Sometimes I think about that day they laughed at me, calling me weak and spineless as I walked away from my own house. I wonder if they're still laughing now from their federal prison cells. To everyone who supported me through this nightmare, thank you from the bottom of my heart. To anyone currently going through something similar, please document absolutely everything and seek professional legal help immediately. Don't wait, and don't try to handle it alone. And to Rebecca, if you ever read this from the prison library, who's weak now,